They called her Assistant Jesus. They laughed at her choices, whispered behind her back, and told her she was wasting the best years of her life. And Sarah, she just smiled and kept walking. But here's what nobody tells you about a woman who refuses to compromise. She's not waiting because she's afraid. She's waiting because she knows exactly what she deserves. This is her story. And by the end, you understand why patience is never, ever wasted. University was loud. Friday nights smelled like cheap perfume and bad decisions. Sarah's friends, Temi, Chioma, and Ada, lived for it. Every weekend was a new party, a new guy, a new story to share. Monday morning. And Sarah was in the library. Not because she was boring. Not because she didn't know how to laugh. But because she had made a decision. One she wasn't willing to trade for a night she'd regret. Sarah, come out now. You're too serious for this life, Timmy would call, leaning against the door frame with a bright smile. I'm good, Sarah always said. Have fun. And they would laugh every single time. Assistant Jesus, they called her, waiting for her husband to fall from heaven. But here's what nobody saw. Sarah wasn't miserable. She was building, quietly, deliberately, brick by brick. She graduated with honors. Her friends graduated with stories. Both thought they had made the right choice, but life was about to start separating them in ways none of them expected. One by one, her friends got married. First Ada, then Chioma, a big church wedding with white roses and a groom who looked like he'd stepped off a magazine cover. Then Timmy, quiet and quick, just a small ceremony, and Sarah sat at each reception, smiling through the ache. Because here's the truth she wouldn't say out loud. She was beginning to wonder if she'd gotten it wrong. Not about her values, but about the timing. Her mother had started calling more frequently. Her aunties at family gatherings would touch her arm gently and ask, "Any news, my dear?" And that gentle touch somehow hurt more than any insult. 27 now. Still single, still trusting. But trust, when nobody around you shares it, starts to feel a lot like loneliness. One evening, she sat alone in her apartment, Bible open on her lap, and she could have said yes to the wrong person just to feel chosen. Many women do. Nobody would have blamed her. But Sarah knew something most people forget. Desperate choices don't produce peaceful lives. So she held on. One more day. Lower her standards, as if having standards was a problem. She deleted the message, then sat staring at her phone for a long time. This is the part of the story most people skip. The quiet, invisible battle of a woman who refuses to break. No dramatic moment, no argument. Just a woman, alone, choosing herself over and over again when nobody was watching. Would you have done the same? Drop your answer in the comments. She could have said yes to the wrong person just to feel chosen. Many women do. Nobody would have blamed her. But Sarah knew something most people forget. Desperate choices don't produce peaceful lives. So she held on one more day. Ada's younger sister got married on a Saturday in April. Sarah arrived late. Traffic had swallowed the whole afternoon. The hall was packed. She scanned the room for a familiar face, found none. The only empty seat was at a corner table, next to a quiet man in a plain gray suit. She sat. He glanced over, nodded once. "I'm Michael," he said simply. "Sarah." No pickup line, no performance. Just two people eating jollof rice and watching a couple dance their first dance. He asked her what she did. She told him. She asked him back. "I just returned from the States," he said, trying to figure out what's next. Something about him was calm, like still water. They talked until the hall started emptying. He asked for her number. She gave it Not because he was impressive, because he was real. He called the next morning. Their first date was a small cafe. No luxury restaurant, no grand gesture, just conversation that went 3 hours without either of them noticing. He opened doors. He listened when she spoke. He never once made her feel like her values were an inconvenience. Meanwhile, her friends had opinions. That's him. After all that waiting, Chioma texted, "He looks ordinary, Sarah?" Timmy added. Sarah read the messages, set her phone down, and smiled. Ordinary, as if they could see what she saw. 6 months in, Michael asked her to meet his family. She walked into a house that was not a house. It was a compound. 3 buildings, staff art on every wall. His father was one of the most respected businessmen in Lagos. Michael was his only son. He washed her face carefully. "I didn't tell you earlier because I needed to know you wanted me. Not this." Sarah looked at him for a long moment. "Michael," she said quietly, "I knew who you were before I saw any of this." And she meant it. Wealth was never what she was waiting for. She was waiting for peace. They got married on a quiet December morning. Not a big Lagos spectacle, just the people who mattered. A white dress, and a man who looked at her like she was the answer to a prayer he had been praying. Her friends attended. They smiled. Some of them cried because they finally understood something that had confused them for years. Sarah was never waiting to be rescued. She was waiting to be matched. A woman who knows her worth doesn't lower it just because the room gets uncomfortable. She didn't wait for a perfect man. She waited for the right one. And God right on time. Mike always saying exactly that. So I have to ask you this. Do you think Sarah was right to wait? Would you have had the same patience? Let me know in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it today.